blueberries begin to. Am I being recorded now? Post-emergent use, I don't like this, but this causes injury and more problems than what I would. I think it causes more problems, so we'll move on from that one. We need to select the best rate. More is not necessarily better. Controls most common grasses, blackberry, lambkill, hardhack, aster, sheep sorrel, poverty oak grass, and we need a minimum of 200 liters a hectare of water in spray solutions. Become familiar with fact sheet number 250, best management practices that we spoke of that Dr. Yarborough put in place at the University of Maine. And then again, for your credits, this with Sinbar, it's primary soil residual herbicide with some foliar activity. Active ingredient is Turbosil at 80%. It's a group 5 herbicide, primarily added to control annual grasses, sheep sorrel, sedges, and has an REI of 12 hours. Degradation of spray solutions may occur if not used within 24 hours. Don't mix with Venture L. Apply within 2 weeks of Venture L application. And it does require a minimum of 200 liters a hectare of water in spray solution. Again, the PPE is we need to be shoes, socks, long chemical resistant gloves when handling these herbicides. Some parting points for Velpar and Sinbar. Again, we want to have as much information and knowledge as possible. Having resources such as Terry to help with these field prescriptions is critical. He's your pharmacist for the acre. Be informed, read and understand the label, observe all safety precautions, and proper equipment servicing calibration are key as well too. The 4R principles, which is for everything we do: the right source, right rate, right time, right place. And weed control is about utilizing the entire toolbox. We got to pick that right tool for the correct job. Where our toolbox seems to get skinnier and skinnier. So we want to make sure that we use those herbicides at the right for the right weed and take into consideration organic matter so that we can optimize our efficacy. And of course, protection of the environment and stewardship of our industry is everyone's responsibility. I mean, I think this is something that we all have a responsibility for. We're seeing a need for greater and greater advocacy, and so that we can educate others beyond us in the agricultural world. Where when you speak with a lot of people who are outside of agriculture, I think we find that there's a lot of misconceptions, and some of these misconceptions are being translated into having regulatory and laws passed without really understanding the science and the importance of these tools that we utilize. One of our strengths, I believe, within our group is within Novasource, and why I'm happy Terry gave me this opportunity to get in front of some key people in the blueberry market. Is there are going to be times where we have to come together for advocacy and have to help with some of these misconceptions that might negatively impact our business. It's Loroxel is a prime example. We had some regulatory issues last year, but through good advocacy with the Canadian Hort Council, the different potato groups, growers writing letters of support, we were able to maintain this critical active for the potato market. These are things where we're all on the same team here. Earlier today I was working with we're fighting to keep Diuron available here in the States, and you find yourself working with paint suppliers. A lot of times people don't know how much of these active ingredients are used in other common household items. There's very few of these actives who aren't in our medicine cabinets, or in the case of Diuron on paint on our houses. The vast majority of the population doesn't realize this, and how important these CP products and active ingredients are, not only to agriculture, but to pharmaceuticals and industrial chemicals as well. And it truly is up to us to make sure to have that conversation with people, and to make sure that they realize that we can use these products as safely as we do in our house or in our medicine, whether it be pharmaceuticals or industrial products. And that's something that I think each of us have a responsibility for, whether it's speaking in our schools or working with different groups. So that's what I have here to say for Velpar and Sinbar. I do want to go into, what we're seeing here in the United States and Canada as we're approaching the spring year. From a manufacturing standpoint, we're seeing transportation freight is a struggle. We're short on drivers here in the U.S. I'm finding the same to be true in Canada, and most of our products are having to move here from the U.S. up to Canada. We are seeing delays. We are seeing some congestion at our ports. There's some, union turmoil in our Western ports. And freight is going to continue to be a challenge. I think that's something that's only going to get more difficult for all of us. The cost of transportation is still 2x of what it was here pre-pandemic. Luckily we've seen some softening of some pricing, mainly due to the fact that there was such a mild winter in Europe and the Northern Hemisphere. In fact, Europe had its warmest winter since Roman times. So that definitely helped with some of our natural gas and oil pricing, and maybe even saw some softening in the fertilizer market. But again, China's back on board. They're sucking up that excess natural gas and oil. They are definitely producing not up to pre-pandemic levels, but they're ramping up. The current supply chain trends, the ag chem is still there's still some backlog. I mean, we're not, this isn't 2019. We're still seeing some backlog with as we were talking about right before began this presentation, that we have a real worker shortage here in the States. And from what I'm hearing, there is in Canada as well too. And we're just not getting the full employment that we had in 2019. Warehousing, even in the warehousing, they're short of guys who will just run the forklift, and we're full of the wrong products. We've got about 5 or 6 actives that we've got large supply on, and we don't have the right products in some cases where they need to be. So we're also seeing some inconsistent purchasing, mainly just due to the fact, again, we're having to plug and play, and okay, this product's short, so we got to plug in this product. So we're just having to get to be better forecasters, which isn't a bad thing. I mean, I think we all have upped our game when it comes to communication. I think we all know that just in time is something that we want to be having more conversations about our early orders and discussions on prepays and making sure that we communicate as much as we can to the retail level, so that retailer can then communicate to the distributor, who then can communicate to us, so we can make sure that so that we can get these products at the right time and right place. So seeing great improvements from last year, that's for sure. But we're still not at 2019. I think the biggest hurdle we're going to have this year is going to be transportation. Is going to be a continuing issue for us all. So again, I want to end with thanking all of you for giving me this opportunity to get in front of you, and also again appreciate communication in any way. I think in the environment we're in right now, it's very important for us to have a very open communication from the retailer, from the grower to the retailer, all the way up to the manufacturer. So again, thank you very much for this opportunity. And Terry, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Ryan. Great presentation. And you're bang on with the advocacy thing that we sometimes as farmers kind of get in our little bubble and forget that the public out there doesn't like what we do, and they just assume that we love to spray chemicals just because we do, and they don't realize that there's a role and a purpose in it, not just for agriculture, but many other facets of life, as you pointed out. There is one question here in the chat box. We've seen a rapid escalation in the price of both plant health products last year. Are we going to see the same increase this year? So I guess he's referring to your Velpar and Simbar. Do you see price increases, and will it be on par with past years, or more or less? Or
only at probably like the Truro Agrimart, but other than that, no, Terry. I'm no, you're best when it comes to pricing in your area. I don't. It was a very unnatural year last year for everything. Didn't matter what you were dealing with, but for certain products, yes, I have a feeling, Terry, you have as good a handle on pricing as I do. So
sure, this is just
it's basically. I don't want to say it, but it's kind of locked and loaded, you kind of. So yeah, so well, you have pretty much the as good of answer as I could give.
Yeah, no, like I think they were just wondering, like some chemistries did go up in value just for various reasons over and above the freight of moving it. So I think that's what the customers.
Well, it's, we also have currencies that we need to have. We're currently in a currency war with China, Russia. Russia just went to off the USD. We also freight at one point, to move freight. I think many of us here know that a large portion of our actives do come from overseas. And, we saw, especially last year, you saw freight for some of those container shipments, that historically we could move over a container for $3,500 to $4,000. Again, I'm speaking in USD, as I always do, for $3,500 to $4,000 a container. And it went up as high. We had some containers coming over in that $28,000 to $30,000 range. All of our products in crop protection are logistically sensitive products. We're also going to continue to see further regulatory burdens as we see, and that's again why I mentioned this advocacy here in the States, as well as in Canada, as we're going to have to every time we have to do a study for MRLs. These are 7-figure studies. And
Yes.
the same cost as they are for whether you're doing a herbicide or you're doing a pharmaceutical. I mean, these do cost a great deal of dollars there. So I don't see that becoming less.
No, I
I
think
guess
you're right.
I mean, I know that's probably not the answer. I don't see costs. I don't see anything. Especially when it comes to the labor, I think is the bigger, stickier issue when it comes to the cost of these crop protection products. Labor is a pretty sticky inflationary factor. And as I just told you, I mean, we had a guy who's trying to get quite a raise to just run forklifts, but we got to have them, and we're just I don't see where that I don't see that softening, I guess.
No, I think you're right.
know that's kind of a 40,000 foot answer, but
Yeah. No, that's 100% true. And probably on that note, we should wrap it up. I think at this point, we got another speaker that we need to get on in order to keep on track for time. So I want to thank you, Ryan, for your presentation. If there's any other questions that come up, we'll send them to you by email, and you can send a response back to us that we can reach out to the clients on if anything else comes up. So thank you very much for your presentation. We'll probably ask you to unshare your screen so that we can get Patrick Langille loaded up.
Yep, all good. Get that off.
And don't be afraid to send more of that warm weather up this way.
I'll do what I can.
And can you hear me okay?
Yes, you're coming in perfect, Patrick.
Okay, good. I enjoyed your presentation, Ryan. I spent a number of years at a company called DuPont, and I recognize some of your active ingredients.
So have you tried sharing the screen there, Patrick?
Just a second here, and I'm going to do the best I can here. Okay, do you see?
Nothing's on the screen yet. While Patrick's loading up his presentation, I'll just remind the audience that for those of you that are looking for pesticide points, if your name isn't in full and sent to it or is on the screen at the same way as you sent us your registration, we won't be able to know for sure if we got the right person for pesticide point recording. So just when you get a chance there, just take a look at your Zoom display name and make sure it's the same as what you would have registered with. So that way we can record you properly for your pesticide points.
Can you see my screen now?
Yeah, that's perfect there now. That's all right on.
Okay.
So Patrick, take it away. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. So my name is Patrick Langille, and I want to thank Truro Agrimart for having me here today. I am now, my current position is, in the last number of years, is the Canadian manager for a company called Helena. And they have a number of products that we distribute through Truro Agrimart in Nova Scotia. So they asked me to do a bit of an introduction on who Helena is, what Helena does in the US and in Canada, a few of our products in Canada, but I'm basically going to focus in on one product called Resurge, which is a granular humic acid. So Helena itself is the second largest ag distributor across the United States. The only company larger than Helena in the States is Nutrien. And so they're quite big in south of the border, but not so much up here in Canada. And that really gives us a good opportunity to look at what Helena has and see what would fit into the Canadian marketplace. We are the largest global manufacturer of adjuvants. We are the second largest manufacturer of liquid additives, and we are a global leader in biostimulant development. We are 60 or 70 years old. So since 1987, we have been owned by a company called Meredith from Japan, who bought Helena from Bayer, who owned it for a decade or so before that. And again, as I mentioned, my name is Patrick Langille. I'm the Canadian manager, and we distribute in Nova Scotia via Truro Agromart. So I thank you for this time to speak about Helena. So again, Helena started in 1957 and basically started in Helena, Arkansas, and started by delivering a few products to that area. And today they are a large company, as I mentioned, the second largest in the US, and is involved all across the country. We have over 6,000 employees, 900 sales, over 500 locations, and over a $5 billion a year sales volume. So it is a big company in the States, and it's really exciting to see what we are able to do to bring some of those products up here to Canada. HPG, which is Helena Products Group, is different than the distribution arm of Helena. Those are the products that Helena makes themselves and develops them, does the research and development for those products, and then brings them to the marketplace. And we focus in on a number of areas. Again, as I mentioned, we are a global leader in adjuvants. About 22% of our business is the adjuvant business. Bioscience, biostimulants, biological additives. This is a growing area, one of which we're going to speak about today with Resurge, and that is a good fifth of our total business. Then we have, nutritionals, a few various fertilizers, seed treatments, and then a number of value-added chemistries that are in the States. It's quite a bit more difficult to bring things up here to Canada, and you need a lot more resources to get some of those chemistries registered. But we're looking at what we can bring up here to Canada as what would make sense. If you look at the geographical diversity of Helena across the States, again, it's across the country, with a large majority of it being in corn, soybeans, but a lot of it in specialty products, a lot of them in potatoes in Maine, a lot of them in blueberries in Maine, and a number of crops across the country. So when I think about bringing new products to Canada or introducing a product to Truro Agromart and saying, hey, what is it that we should bring, or what would help you guys help your customers? There's a few areas that I try to focus on, and try to focus on registering products that offer different benefits, different value, different end result to what is currently available in Canada. And you're going to see that when we speak about Resurge. It's a different type of humic acid that we are the only one on the market that is like this. Focus on products that help improve nutrient use efficiency of the current fertilizers that we are using. We all know that fertilizers are not 100% efficient, and what can we do in order to try to improve the money that we're putting into our current fertilizer applications? Focus on products that help improve the efficacy of the current active ingredients, the current pesticides that are available in Canada. And this is where a lot of the adjuvants come in. Adjuvant usage in Canada has not been at the same level in Canada as it has been in the States, but we're starting to see a lot more products come to the market and learn about how to use them in order to help improve what we're trying to do with the pesticides that we currently use. And the other thing that I really, really focus in on is work with local demos, local growers, and everyone needs to touch and feel the product, understand what it does in local areas, and understand how it can best fit into your local crop cycles and bring you benefits locally. And that kind of takes us to the product strategy that we have for Helena in Canada. First, we focus on the products that we have, which are the HPG products. Then take another section of focusing in on agronomy to understand the products themselves, how they are performing, and the agronomy and the yield and the benefit that that brings to you all locally, and then measure that through AgriIntelligence, whether that's through doing foliar analysis, whether that's doing stem analysis, whether that's doing satellite imagery, giving the why to what we're suggesting the benefit is of these products to you guys. So that's our overall strategy for bringing new products to Canada. So a few of the products that we have in the adjuvants and utility modifier areas. Now, I just want to clarify here, adjuvants are registered products through the PMRA, and they are registered to help improve the efficacy of a pesticide application. A utility modifier is a product that will alter some other application within that pesticide tank. So it could be a water conditioner, it could be a soil deposition aid, it could be a placement aid, it could be a drift reduction agent. And that's kind of a major difference between adjuvants themselves and utility modifiers. On the utility modifier side, we have a product called Relax, and it is a water conditioning agent. We all know that it's important to ensure that the pesticides that you're applying do not get tied up themselves with the cations that are in the water. The harder your water it is, the more cations there are, and it can reduce the efficacy of your herbicide or pesticide application. Markdown is a pre-emergent soil deposition agent that I'm going to speak about briefly. Alignment is a drift reduction agent, and Fire Zone is a pre-plant burn down application that we have coming with a full registration from the PMRA next year. Bioscience products, Resurge, which we're going to get into here in a few minutes. Revere, which is a really neat product that we have registered here in Canada. It is a additive, it's a liquid additive to starter fertilizers that contains plant growth regulators. It's the only one of that kind. And then Cypro, which is coming very soon, which is a enzyme additive that we've been working on. It's been very successful in the States. And some nutritional fertilizers that are used broadly. So just a little bit on Relax. Relax is a proprietary blend of liquid AMS and water conditioning agents. Now, there's a few products out there that are a replacement to liquid AMS, but Relax is actually a product that is that plus water conditioning agents that help reduce the impacts of herbicide being tied up due to hard water. And what it really does is just help improve the sprayability, the ability of your pesticide to tank, to mix correctly in the tank, and it's easy to use and to clean out. And it can be used with any pesticide application. And the rate is dependent on whichever product that you need. Again, if you're applying a liter of or 1 liter of Relax in 10 gallons of water, which is 2.5%, that would deliver the same as 8.5 pounds of ammonium sulfate, and then other leading water conditioning agents, which is the difference that Relax has compared to other products. I mentioned Markdown. I kind of like working with Markdown. It's the only pre-emergent utility modifier or spray deposition agent that's registered in Canada, and it can be applied on foliar and soil applied herbicides, but it really is we're focusing in on the pre-emergent herbicide world to help keep the herbicides in the weed germination so longer. And here's just a picture of the spray off the two sides, with you can see the driftable spray fines on the right where Markdown is not being added versus on the left where Markdown is added. It helps you get your pesticide to reach the target much more quickly. It helps prevention of active ingredient leaching. It lowers the potential losses of active ingredients due to spray bounce or splash. It prevents tie-up with plant trash and stubble if you're going in to reduce tillage, and it can help reduce loss due to UV light. So again, this is a product that's different than other types of utility modifiers that are on the market. And again, what it really does is it keeps the herbicide oil stabilized in the top 6 inches of the soil profile, to keep it there throughout that growing season when those pre-emergent seeds will be, weed seeds will be germinating. So it keeps it in place longer throughout the season. Okay, now let's talk about research, because that's what we're really here to speak about today. Research is a humic acid, and it's a different formulation of humic acid from what we have seen on the market so far. There's been a lot of humic acids hit the market in both the US and Canada, and not all of them are created equally. So I'm going to go through here just a little bit about what humic acids are, what you need to look for, and what you can expect to receive when you have a good humic acid product that can be delivered properly. So, what are humic acids? Well, they're not actually a specific compound, but they're a group of benzene rings. Basically, they are soil organic matter that breaks down into humus, which then breaks down into humic acid. It is the last stage before it would get to coal, if you will. And it depends where these humic acid comes from will determine the quality of the humic acid that you have in your product. And really what we're doing is adding a product to the soil that can help keep the fertilizer in place and attach itself to the soil colloids so that it is able to be brought into solution when there is moisture available, allowing it to be taken up into the plant roots much more efficiently. You can kind of consider your humic molecule to be like a cockleburr, because it has a number of positive and negative exchange sites attached to it. And due to all those positive and negative ion exchange sites, you can have a lot of the anions and cations that are in your fertilizer blends or naturally in your soil or tied up in your soil. They can then be attached to this cockleburr or the humic acid, which will then keep them in solution and keep them in place to become available for when the roots of the crop that you're growing are developing. And there's a lot of benefits to this. You get improved soil structure, you get increased water holding capacity. For example, Resurge can hold up to 12 times its water weight. So it keeps water in place when it's dry and helps to hold it when it's too wet. It reduces soil erosion. It improves nutrient use efficiency and brings nutrients so that they can be taken up into the root zone much more easily. With this improved soil structure, you get enhanced biological activity. And with that comes improved water infiltration, which leads to improved water, air movement, and oxygen and cation exchange capacity, which all leads to a healthier crop. And when you have a healthier crop, that's when we can reduce the stress of the crop when we have situations that are such as cold springs or cold soils or wet soils or situations where the environment is giving the crop some stress that they cannot normally get over as easily. So, where do humic acids come from? Well, first of all, you have to think about how long the Earth has been around. It's for millions of years. And during all those millions of years, that is when we've always had breakdown in vegetation debris and animal debris. And this eventually forms into peat. And then as that peat is compressed between the different sediment layers, it then forms into humus. If we allowed it to develop even further, it would turn into a product called coal. So we really need to find good areas where we can take the ore and mine the humus. And not all mines and not all humates are created equally. A lot of the mines are in areas where there could have been an ocean bed in the last number of millions of years, and that increases the salt content that's in your humic ore. In our mine, it comes from New Mexico, which is a freshwater product, which really is one of the higher quality ores that you can get in order to produce humic acid products. They tell me that the two best places globally to source humic ore is either in New Mexico or in the Ukraine. And since we're here in North America, it makes more sense for us to source from North America. And then it also depends on what parent material is being decomposed over the last 65 million years. And one thing about high in the mountains, you have a lot of coniferous trees, a lot of different deciduous trees, and a lot of different animals. And that also, if you compare that to maybe the prairie land where it has been mostly grasses, the diversity of that humic acid that has been developed over the last number of years that's now turned into ore really is better for the type of products that we need. And what this leads to is whether you have a humic acid that contains long chain or short chain amino acids. And the short chain is something called flovic acid. Flovic acid is your engine. That is your machine that helps attach those anions and cations to the solid colloids so that they can be in place for the benefit of having them there. And that's why some of the products that come from grassland soils they have longer chain, and they end up with more carbon coming out of the product. Carbon is also good, but it's very different from flovic acid, which really is the engine. So we had a product concept where we wanted to develop a product that was a high quality ore, that had low dust, that could be easily blended, and it could be used with all granular fertilizers. A lot of the products in the past were dusty. A lot of them couldn't be easily blended. A lot of them weren't easy to be mixed. So we came up with a product called Resurge. It is a 70% humic granular engineered with a patented process from Helena. And what's really different about this product it has consistent sizing in all of the granulars that are in the product. And this is important because then it is easy to be blended with agricultural fertilizers. The SGN number for Resurge is 240 to 260, which means it's the very same as NPK, all of the major macro fertilizers that we're using, and a lot of the micro fertilizers. So it blends easily and evenly with agricultural fertilizers. Has a bulk density of 47 pounds per square foot, which means it stays in place and the particles don't dissolve until it gets placed in the soil and comes in contact with soil moisture. So what we have been able to prove is that we end up having a product that can be delivered evenly throughout the soil where you are applying it, which means that the flovic acid that you are wanting to distribute is being evenly distributed around the roots of the seed or the roots of the plant of the crop that you're growing. This is a comparison to some of our previous formulations, and you can see that it's almost 2.5 more particles of Resurge is being used versus per square foot than other products. And here is just an example. I encourage anybody who gets their hand on any of the product Resurge to put a little bit in the water, just in some glass. And that yellow that is being released, and this is over a 2-hour time lapse, is the flovic acid. If you have a product that has a lot of black being released, that is carbon. It's the flovic acid that's your engine that's helping you improve your soil structure, improve your root growth, and then improve your yields. So the product deliverables is that it's a low dust granular that helps improve the nutrient use efficiency of the fertilizer that you're currently using. Label uses, it can be applied with a seed drill, with a spreader, can be banded, or with aerial application. And it is registered in Canada by the CFI. Now, I have a few minutes left here. I'm just going to speak about some of our results that we've seen. I think the next speaker is also going to speak about some of his results that he's seen with Resurge. These are a number of the trials that I did in 2022. These are field demos. There's almost 30 of them. And you can see what's neat about Resurge is that it releases the fluvic acid over, say, 1 to 3 months after it's applied, or from the time it's applied to say up to 3 months, which is really where you need to improve the soil structure for that year. So we're seeing consistently improved yield for the crop that you're looking at. This is an example of an oak trial in Ontario. Here's an example of some barley work that was done out west. Again, this is in high saline soil. It really ties up the saline soil so that it allows the barley to grow through that. And what we ended up, here's a picture off that field, and you can see a lot more of the roots that are available and have grown where the Resurge is applied than without. Here's some cabbage plants that were used for Resurge. The roots of the plant on the right had 20 pounds of Resurge added to it, and this is a plant, a crop that was in 2021 down in Cape Breton. Here's some dry beans in Alberta. Again, not a big crop for the Maritimes, but you can see an increase in roots and yield. So it really doesn't matter so much about what type of crop you have. We're focusing heavy in on potatoes because Resurge really helps improve and increase phosphorus and potassium uptake. Potatoes are hungry for phosphorus, and we're seeing almost consistently increased yield when you either band or apply broadcast the Resurge during either just before or during planting. That brings us to blueberries. Here's again what we're doing here in blueberries in Nova Scotia is adding Resurge to the granular fertilizer application in the vegetation year. So here's some, I think it was 40 pounds per acre that was applied in 2020. It was a field that had a few bare spots in it, and that Resurge that year really helped fill in some of those bare spots for the grower, which you could see the difference in how the field looked in 2021. This was in Mount Tom in Nova Scotia. And this is an example of some Resurge that was applied near Sackville, New Brunswick. It was applied in 2021, and this was the crop in 2022. And they did some yield work here and did find a positive result on the yield for this section. So some areas where Resurge shines is, for example, in low pH soils, which is really where we're trying to help you guys with wild blueberry growth. It helps tie up the aluminum, for example, in low pH soils. And then this releases more of the NP or K into the area where they can be taken up by the roots of the blueberry plants. Low organic matter soils, it helps improve nutrient use efficiency, especially anything under, say, 4. Sandy loam soils, specialty crops, you see improved yield. And then what we're also seeing in a number of short season crops, you can get maturity about 3 to 5 days earlier. And that's very important for things such as sweet corn or crops like that. And wild blueberry production, we're seeing improved plant stand and improved nutrient uptake, which leads to improved yield. So that's what I have. Hopefully I stayed on time pretty good.
You're right on the mark, pretty much, I'd say.
Well, I heard you say to me, stay on time, so I tried.
No, they could. So there is one question in the chat box.
Okay.
And it said, is research certified organic?
Okay, very good question. No, it is not. And the reason it is not is because the technology that we use in order to create all the same size granulars is not a registered process that's considered organic. So we cannot get OMRI approval for research. We have other products that are organic, but research does not qualify.
Okay. One more came up in, so how much does this cost per acre?
What I'm going to let Terry answer that because he would be the one that would be selling the product to you. But let's talk about blueberries here. Blueberry rates, we're recommending 40 pounds per acre in the vegetation year. And I'll let Terry suggest how much he thinks 40 pounds of that would be worth. In winter wheat, like or spring wheat, the rate is 10 pounds per acre, and in potatoes is 20 pounds per acre. But we're finding with perennials such as wild blueberries that 40 pounds seems to be the sweet spot.
So for 80 or for 40 pounds to the acre, it add about $80 to the cost of producing that. Does that make sense? So if you go on the 40 pounds per acre rate, it's going to add $80. If you go on to 20 pounds, it'll be $40.
Is there another question there?
I don't see any others, and probably in order to keep on track now, we probably should. Yeah, there's no other questions in the chat box.
Sorry, there is one more.
Oh, is it? Sorry, I missed
Can
it.
research be compared to biochar?
I would say no. It's and I'm gonna say I don't. I can't. I'm not the right person to answer that question because I don't know enough about biochar to know what some of the product attributes and where they're placing their product. But I know with research that it's the high quality ore that helps deliver the fulvic acid that can easily be blended with fertilizer and then applied evenly across your field so you get it where you need it.
Okay, I think we'll stop it there. Patrick, is I'm sure Dr. Percival will add some more because I think that's some of his presentations on research along with some other fungicides that he's tested. So
thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Patrick, and we'll have you unshare your screen so that we can get Dr. Percival loaded up.
Okay.
I think it's in your
my hands now.
In your hands there now, Percival.
Okay, and while I'm scrambling here, trying to figure out how to use Zoom here, what sort of time frame are we looking at, Terry? When would you want me to wind?
Can go to however long you want, I suppose. Now, since you're the last presenter,
yeah. Well, I'll try to keep it reasonable then, anyway, and we'll see how things go from there.
We allotted you an hour if you want an hour, but as I said, I'm sure that if anyone wants to knock off after that, they can.
Oh yeah, they'll start to fizzle out.
Yeah.
And how I've structured this, and I'll just try to share the screen now, is I'm going to structure that. I'm going to start on the disease. Well, actually, it's yield potential first, and then we'll get towards the end. I'll get into the research results. So it is a little bit of a variance. Okay, so with that, what I need to do first, though, is get my slideshow working.
Yes, everything's showing up on the screen well.
Yeah, okay. Can you see it now? Okay.
Yeah, you just want to probably move it to the full screen view.
I must have picked the wrong one. Yeah, I did. So here we go. Try that again. Is that better?
Yes, that's perfect.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks. All right. So what I'd like to do is just go over, we'll start with the disease management aspects first. But before we get into that, what I'd like to do is I'll just give an overview of the group that's here working with me at the agricultural campus with the research program. We've had some really interesting developments over the last 6 months from an environmental perspective, which is probably going to have quite a pronounced effect on the yield. So I'll just briefly go over that. As I mentioned, the research, it'll go down towards the end. So that's a little bit out of queue. And then I'll proceed to get into then some of the disease management aspects. And the emphasis there is going to be put on the crop year. That's just given that where there's a lot of the changes occurring with respect to new products. So in the group, we've had some changes over the past few months. So Joel Langdon, he was working on our remote sensing. So in particular, the analysis of the imagery that we were getting from unmanned aerial vehicle systems. And so Joel moved on to job in Saskatchewan. And so we have a new person coming in, hoping that's going to that can be announced next week. So that's going to be a positive development. We have Richard Langille, who's going to be working with us this upcoming year on the equipment side of things, with both the tractors as well as the drone side. We've got Manpreet Kaur, who just started with us as a research biologist, focused on the plant sciences side of things. 3 research interns, and then a lot of the work I'm going to be presenting tonight is from the graduate students, including Kenneth Andrew, Alex Cornell, and Joel Abbey. And last but not least, researchers aren't very good with paperwork or prefer to stay away from it. So the research program itself, it wouldn't be possible without the help of Sandra Murphy. So there's the 3 grad students that we have working in the program. So Joel, Alex, and Kenneth. And Joel and Alex have really done a bulk of the work on disease management side. So with respect to blueberry yield potential, when you're looking at it, it's really it's a conglomerate of several factors that come into play, consisting of, okay, well, what's the coverage in the field? And along with that, how dense is the canopy? So the stem height becomes quite important. A really important factor that we're seeing in the last few years is to maintain that canopy health throughout the field season. In particular, rust in the sprout year is probably one of the easiest ways to lose yield potential when it starts to creep in right around the time harvest ramps up, and then thereafter throughout September. And keeping an eye on the floral buds and flower numbers is also an important consideration, and especially given the minus 28, minus 30 degrees centigrade temperatures we had a few weeks ago. I'm not even sure how the blueberries are going to come out of that were exposed. Hopefully most were under snow cover. And then pollination fertilization aspects come into play. I'll talk about those in a few minutes later. An area that we're seeing some positive impact on the research side is with fruit set and how to improve that and get a higher proportion of the flowers transitioning into marketable berries. And then keeping the pest related issues down. And this includes not only the leaf, what we call the leaf spot diseases, other stem diseases, but also monolinea and botrytis, which I'll be focusing on here tonight. And then, as I just mentioned, there's a lot of other factors that come into play, such as the weed issues, and that has quite a bearing on a good starting point with respect to how the research project started. And then lastly, being able to get as many of the berries as possible. So when you then look at the situation in a few months' time, when hopefully the majority of the floral buds have gotten through the winter, decent shape, it is quite possible now to get well over 150 million flowers per acre, and to be present in a blueberry field. There are some that were well above this in Nova Scotia this year. particular with one grower processor. And then also probably still the best field I've seen from a wild blueberry yield potential perspective was in Prince Edward Island. It's just unbelievable, the bloom density that was present in this particular site. And that's the photo on the right that was present. Now, challenge becomes when you look at trying to then get those flowers pollinated, is the majority of the blueberry clones or phenotypes that are present in a field, they're self-incompatible. So in other words, if you take pollen from the same flower, put it on a stigmatic surface, there are sufficient levels of incompatibility, you aren't going to get a viable berry. It won't set fruit. And so as a result of this, you need massive movements of pollen. And the pollen grains, they're large, they're sticky, they're very much dependent upon a vector in the form typically of an insect such as a honeybee, bumblebee, as well as other pollinating insects to move this pollen around. So it's an unbelievable amount of pollen that has to move in a short period of time in order to get the crop or the flower fertilized and to get a decent crop. And that's something that's always a good starting point just to be aware of. Now, looking then at the flowers, the process all started the previous year. So the floral buds, the induction, the initiation tends to occur in the middle of the summer. So mid-July at tip dieback, that's always a good visual cue that the process starts. And as I mentioned a few minutes ago, blueberry rust, it's probably one of the quickest killers of yield potential. If you lose the canopy early, the resources, in particular the sugars, the carbohydrates, that just aren't available to support next year's crop. So late season rust control is absolutely critical if you really want to try to maximize your yield potential going into that cropping year. And as I also mentioned a few minutes ago, I'm a little bit concerned about the winter temperatures we had a few weeks ago. If you have time in the next month or two, so particularly before the monilinear blight window commences, it might be a good idea to go out, get cut some blueberry stems, and just get an idea of how much damage there is with respect to these winter temperatures. And so it's a pretty easy process. Just go sample your stems, put them in a beer cup with some water, and give them a couple of weeks, and you'll have a fairly good idea of the level of damage then that was present. And so it's something else then that you want to be aware of. So maintaining a healthy canopy, really, really important in that in the sprout year. And this is a photograph of a good example of this I believe this was up in Benville. And this was after Thanksgiving, canopy still in fantastic shape. So the winter temperatures, best way to think of these minus 30 temperatures, you will, at these really, really low temperatures, get ice crystals forming in the cells, resulting in ripping and tearing. And eventually you're going to get breakdown of the cells, and then you can pick up the oxidative browning. And so when you do a cross-section of a floral bud, it'll definitely appear as brown and not a nice, healthy green. So the problem that we have in blueberries is when you look at when the plants, particularly the floral bud, is at its maximum hardiness, it prepares for this all throughout the fall. And from the period of really early December through to mid-February, there's a baseline. And in blueberry, there's been some work done, but I'm not sure just where that lower level is. I believe it's probably going to be in the minus 28 to minus 30 degrees centigrade range. Hopefully, the majority of the fields were under snow cover, so we won't have to worry about it. But nonetheless, just given the length of that cold period we had, it might be a concern. So it might be something that you might want to have a look at by going out and sampling some stems. And so that's why I thought I better just mention it now. All right, so now moving on to the business of that's associated with the points that you'll be getting tonight. What I thought I better do is just start off with some of the basics. And so going into the cropping year, the first disease that shows up out of the blocks is monilinear blight. And when you look then at the tissue that's really, really susceptible to it, it's that newly emerging green tissue, and it could be in a leaf bud, it's coming out of that, or the floral bud. It's a disease that's pretty specific. So to blueberries. And if you're to characterize the fungus, it's one that's slow to moderate in its growth characteristics. When you look then at how many cycles, infection cycles we get per year, it's low, generally 2, maybe a bit higher, but generally 2. The disease risk management, when you look at it, we've been gathering populations of this fungus from across the region. We really don't see too much of a shift. It's the fungicides that we're using are still quite effective. And as a result of this, it's quite an easy disease to get good control with, and in particular with the use of the triazole fungicides. So on the other end of the spectrum, you have a nightmare. And it's one that affects a lot of horticultural crops, and it's botrytis blight caused by the fungus Botrytis cinerea. And when you look at, well, when does it start to become a concern in blueberries? It's really when the floral buds, in particular the flowers emerge. They they're not at full bloom yet. They're at that white tip stage is when the risk really starts to ramp up. The thing with botrytis, and you'll see this in a minute, is it's exponentially faster with respect to its growth rate, especially at warm temperatures compared to monolinea blight. It can be present in both the sprout, far more prevalent in the crop year. And the reason why it's such a concern is twofold. It can produce far more or far greater number of infection cycles per year than monolinea. And then when you look then at members of the population, so the fungus that's present in blueberry fields, there's quite a few that have become resistant to some of the active ingredients that we're using in the fungicides. So that's something to be aware of. And then when you then look at the fungicides that are used, they're quite different in the mode of action. So triazoles as a rule are not very good botrytis products. Those that are work best if you get them on before the botrytis really starts to escalate and cause economic losses. So there isn't as much wiggle room in trying to control botrytis as what you have with monolinea blight. And this is a slide, pretty straightforward. So we had a couple of graduate students. One was working on botrytis, the other monolinea. And I said, look, let's do a simple trial. Let's just take a plug out of your cultures and put it in a plate. And let's look at what happens then over the course of a day and a half. And so this is what happened. And on the top, you have 2 plates of the monolinea. And what you'll notice is the culture really, or the fungus really didn't spread too much, maybe a centimeter or 2 from the center of what went in. So not very much, whereas in the case of botrytis, it just filled the plate. And so it just gives you an idea of the growth rates under room temperatures associated with these fungal organisms. So we've had a couple of students and postdocs that have come through the program. And what they also did was they collected, built up, called a library of cultures of botrytis and monolinea that were collected from across the region. And we thought, okay, well, let's have a look at their susceptibilities to the fungicides. And so we have 5 different compounds that were present here in this work that was done just prior to COVID. And the active ingredients that we looked at were boscalid, which is pristine, pyraclostrobin, which was in pristine. We had saprodinol in there, which is a switch, one of the actives in switch. We had a penthiopyrad, which is fontellus, and then fludioxanol, which is also in switch. And then there are different concentrations. And the concentration gradient, 0 is at the top, so where no active ingredient was present. And then as you work your way down the column there, they increase in concentration. And just to help move this along, with 4 out of the 5 active ingredients, what you'll notice is there's this white to grayish fuzzy material, and it's present in the columns in just about all of the active ingredients, with the exception of this last one, which is fludioxanol. And so in summary, this provides then the basis of what I'm indicating to you by saying, look, there's some pretty significant selection pressures when you look at the population structure of botrytis that's present in our blueberry fields. And as a result of this, ongoing assessment and looking at improved techniques to manage this disease is going to become quite important. All right, so then with respect to monolinea blight, I thought I'd better just quickly go over the three major criteria that need to be taken into consideration. And so what these three things consist of is, okay, what about the plant stage? Is it in that susceptible window? And this is where the growing degree day models, it really is going to help and take a lot of the guesswork out of it. And so, time that you would have otherwise spent going to the field and saying, okay, are we at this particular stage? You can have a look at what's coming in from the weather stations, and that'll really help in that process. And so when you look at the work that was done by Paul Hildebrand and Rick Delbridge over the years, they came up with an excellent model, and it's one that's used in the high bush sector as well. And what the general recommendation is okay, first fungicide, really it should go on when 40 to 50% of the buds have reached the V2 or the F2 stages respectively. And if you're looking at this on an individual stem basis, that's fantastic. It absolutely no problems. But the problem is if you have stems then in a field that haven't quite reached that point yet, the fungicide itself is not going to go through those scales. It's that scale provides a pretty impermeable barrier to the fungicide. And as a result of this, if you come in too early with your first monolinea spray, you may have a scenario kind of inadvertently. I know one of the things you want to do in the spring is get going and protect the crop, but you might inadvertently end up with a scenario of having a lot of stems that are unprotected against monolinea blight. So that's something that I thought I'd better mention as well. So if you're to look at this particular figure, and this is out of some production guides from New Brunswick, some excellent photos. On the far right, you can see those scales. If you apply the fungicide at that particular time, it just will not work its way into the tissue. And as a result of that, that stem, even though you've applied the fungicide, it's the material within those buds is going to be unprotected. You need to have some of this underlying green tissue exposed in order to obtain reasonable control. And that for that reason, as you're working your way across progression, the ideal scenario for that first spray would be to have a field of this third stem from the left, which is, they're beginning to crown out. You have lots of exposed green tissue present. So if you have a uniform field of this, it's fantastic. It makes the decision quite easy. Otherwise, it's going to be a challenge. So this is something else that I thought I'd better mention as we work our way through. So the plant stage, definitely a key factor. And what we're also seeing when you're then looking at the stems, and there's thousands of these, if not tens of thousands, that come in year-to-year basis from monolinea and botrytis blight trials, is you generally start seeing the visual effects of the visual symptoms of the disease 7-14 days, depending on the season, after the initial infection has occurred. And so if you were to quantify then, okay, well, when is the peak spore load occurring in the blueberry fields? It's not here earlier on. It's most likely as you're getting into this F3, F4 stages in the growth and development as well. So that's why, in addition to looking at the plant stage, maintaining the presence of these mummies is going to be really, really important on a go-forward basis, because it provides a primary inoculum. And a good example of this is when Rick Delbridge was in the province and monitoring the blueberry fields. Remember, he was up in Farmington, and the question came up, okay, do we need to go in and apply a second blight spray? And at that stage, it was no. And he based it, look, plant stage is moving on. We haven't had any infection periods, and then and then the third is all those epithelial cups were drying up, so they're no longer producing spores. Implications up there, and if I remember correctly, it was about $250,000 savings in fungicide that was attained by using that model. So there are some savings that can be obtained by just being aware of the basics associated with that. And then the other aspect, which is it's difficult to try to get a grasp of, is okay, are the environmental conditions actually conducive for an infection period to occur? And Paul Hildebrand, Rick Delbridge put a lot of time and effort into coming up with this predictive model using temperature as well as wetness duration. And this question came up last night. And when you look at the scenario, if you have just above freezing temperatures, so if it's 2 degrees centigrade, you're going to need more than a day of continual wetness for an infection period or a significant one to have occurred. As you start getting up towards 20 degrees, it drops down to a wetness duration of only 5 hours being required. So you can see definitely temperature comes into play, but wetness duration, it's absolutely essential. And that's where the wetness sensors, or even just keeping an eye on the humidity levels, plays a really important role. Yes, the sensors themselves, it's hard to mimic foliage, but generally what you're going to see is and especially with a spring shower, is when your canopy's wet, it's wet, and you're going to be able to pick it up with those plate sensors quite easily. And once you understand how they work, they're fairly straightforward. Okay, so with respect then to the monolinea and its management this year, rule number one, and especially as we have quite a few new products coming on stream, check with your end user, your processor, your receiver, whoever the berries are going to. You need to check and make sure that the products you're using are acceptable to them. And when you look at it, and especially with some of the larger processors, product may be going to 30 different countries. And it's not only a matter of looking at what's approved for use in Canada, it's in some of these export markets as well. And there are some that may not even want a conventional fungicide being used in the cropping year. And so please check with processor receiver on what's approved for use. As I mentioned earlier, the triazoles work really good. We haven't seen any indication of significant selection shifts occurring yet. So ProLine of all the triazoles continues to be it's a fantastic product for monolinea. There is a kickback. So if you can get a 48, 72 hour period of kickback, but it starts from the commencement of the wetness period. Okay, so it's not when you go back into the field and say, okay, yeah, here we go. It's from when that field became wet. And that's another thing that you need to be aware of. If you have a cold, long, drawn out spring, and there's some variability with respect to the clones, in other words, you got the buds are still in that monolinea risk, so still just recently emerged, while you have others that are coming into bloom. You may want to use for a second monolinea spray, something along the lines of what call a bridge fungicide. And this is where ProPulse comes into play, and it consists of essentially ProLine with some fluopyran. So in other words, Luna, one of the Luna actives in Luna, the Luna products. And this will provide better overall control of the ongoing monolinea, and then also the early stages of botrytis that may occur as well. So it's something that you may want to be aware of. This is where we used Fontellus in the past, but over time, it's a fairly expensive fungicide. And there were some problems with some of the export markets with Fontellus as well. So it's one of the reasons why, if you're interested in using that product, or you have some still in your pesticide storage, check with your end user. Okay, so with botrytis blight, very similar scenarios. So the criteria that you can go through is look at the plant stage. So it really becomes a concern as you're approaching the early stages of bloom. So from that white tip onward, you're in the risk range. So that's what you look at from a plant perspective. Peak susceptibility stage is full bloom, and then shortly thereafter. As far as the features associated with the fungus, if you look at the field history, so in other words, if you're along a shore area and it's known you've had botrytis problems there in the past, chances are you can assume you're going to continue to have some. And another feature that I've got mentioned a little bit farther down is when you're out having a look at the fields, is have a look at some of the other vegetation. So sheep sorrel, it's an excellent indicator plant. And there's generally some in blueberry fields as well. So if you see some with some botrytis affecting the foliage, you know it's there as well. So it's something else to be aware of as well. So field history, also important. And then from an environmental conditions perspective, again, it's a temperature leaf wetness model that comes into play. And the other feature with botrytis is it works best actually if you get the fungicide applied before an infection period occurs, just given the nature of the fungicides that you're working with. They have different modes of action than what's used in monolinear blight. Okay, and as a result of this, the different modes of action, they don't have the kickback attributes that you see with Proline or some of the other triazole fungicides. So the predictive model that continues to work very, very well for botrytis, and this is also a similar format that's used in other crops, is based on temperature, leaf wetness, duration. And so what you'll see overall with botrytis is you don't need as long a window of opportunity for problems to occur. So in other words, for infection to happen. So if you're at 20 degrees centigrade and you have 8 to 10 hours of wetness duration, so even for that matter, overnight, you may be in a scenario where an infection is there's a high risk of it that's going to happen. So again, just keep an eye on those old predictive models. They work really well, and if there's any uncertainties, you can always just refer to the fact sheet. So when it comes time then to managing botrytis blossom blight, there are some different products that are coming on stream, and in the past, we would have seen Pristine in there when it was initially introduced, but unfortunately, the active ingredients, so the bosclid and the paraclostrobin, we're seeing just outright resistance to it by the Botrytis cinerea cultures that are present in the blueberry fields. So unfortunately, its day as a good botryticide are over, and that's why it's not present there anymore. Luna Tranquility is a product that I would start off with, just to rotate the modes of action up a little bit. And if you're in a high risk area, you may actually want to consider the use of switch. And the reason I mention that is when you look at switch, we also saw some indication the Cyprodinol is it's under some selection pressure, so it's not as effective as what it used to be. But the fludeoxonil, the other active ingredient in switch, is still a really good active ingredient for botrytis. So definitely you want to consider using it. Okay, so for a workhorse fungicide for botrytis, my recommendation would be a switch. The other one that's coming on the stream, which is in a long time to see this, and I'm glad to see it registered for use on blueberries in Canada, is Meredith Prime. And it's a Syngenta product, and it also has fludeoxonil situated within it. Now, given that it's a fairly new product, first thing growers should do is check with your processor end user on if this is going to be allowed to be used. There's a lot of there's some challenges from an MRL perspective that the end users need to be aware of as well. So please check with your end user on that product. But as the MRLs continue to be sorted out and the use patterns as well, it's going to be a really nice botrytis product for us. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a bit of insight then into the different options that are present. And then the third, which has really crept into the equation, is the use of Maravon. And when we look at it, and this is something we continue to see in field trials, is the Maravon itself, it's an okay to good fungicide for botrytis control when you include the attributes of the new biofungicide Serafil. It all of a sudden lifts it up really substantially. And I'll get into talking about the mechanisms associated with that later. So Maravon and Serafil is definitely a product I would consider towards the tail end of bloom, and especially since it also does a really nice job then of cleaning up the leaf spot diseases that typically start to occur towards the end of bloom and then really pick up after fruit set. So hopefully that gives you some insight then into some of these fungicides. And as I mentioned, I'll get back then into the Maravon and the Serafil situation in a few minutes. So hopefully that gives you some insight. One thing that I should also mention, and is there is a new form of prothioconazole, so the Sortel that's come on stream. And I hope I've got it listed in some of in the list of products that should be considered for use this year that you can discuss with your processor or end user. It's the same active ingredient that's situated within Proline. When you look at it, its formulation, it's similar with what we used to see with Tilt and Topaz when they first came on stream. So it has some good aspects associated from that perspective. So that's also another product that's come on stream as well. So the biofungicide Serafil, it's one that we've had in trials for quite a few years now. And when you look at it, it's actually a bacteria. So it's a bacillus. And it's one that has not only been developed and is present in Serafil, but there's also other compounds containing this bacillus species that are commercially used, and I believe Serenade is another example of one. Serafil, however, is one that we've had out in trials for quite a few years, and it was actually the BASF rep working as the horticulture crops manager, Scott McDonald, actually gave us the hint or the suggestion that we have a look at it with Maravon. Oh, it must be at least 6 years ago. And when we put it out, we thought, yeah, there's definitely something here. And then so we spent quite a few years just trying to pick out, okay, well, what's going on here? And as Nadine mentioned last night, when you look at the Serafil, and so in other words, the applications of this bacillus compound, when applied to the foliage, it's going to provide a physical barrier. And so you can see the presence of all these bacillus cells situated on the lower surface of a leaf in this particular case. And especially when you're looking at fruit, you think of the blueberry as you know, it's circular, it's got a lot of fluid within it, and it will leak some sugars as well as other materials that will be viewed as nutrients. And they can be used quite effectively by fungal pathogens such as Botrytis cinerea. So having this biofungicide present on the surface of whether it be a leaf or a fruit, it helps remove some of these sources of nutrients then for the pests involved. And then the other aspect is the bacillus also provides some metabolites that really interferes with the fungus. And I'll go over to that in a few minutes. So a PhD student who just finished up with me, Joel Abbey, he looked at applications of the Serafil. And what Joel did is he said, okay, I'm going to apply it. It's not going to be to plants that are showing any symptoms of botrytis. And I want to get a bit of an idea then of what this is actually doing to the blueberry plants. And what he found was that applications of the Serafil actually stimulated the plant's defense. So it was almost like taking the blueberry plant and giving it a shake and say, look, wake up, we've got problems coming. And it's a tool then that can be used quite effectively in helping reduce then the disease pressures when you combine it, especially with a conventional fungicide, such as the Maravon. Okay. And so as a result of this, if you are using it with Maravon, it's best to get it applied before you actually see visual symptoms of botrytis in particular or other diseases. And as I mentioned, Laura here, it really does induce the defense mechanisms within the wild blueberries. And that's one of the key things Joel found in his work. And it's something that's caught quite a bit of attention in fruit production. So we've had quite a few requests for talks on that. So when you look at that, then another feature is inducing, in addition to inducing the plants, get the plant's defense mechanism ramped up, what the bacillus cells also do is they start producing iterin as well as surfactant. And these are lipopeptides that work themselves into the cell membranes of the fungal pathogens such as botrytis, and it more or less causes the fungal cells to collapse. And this is just another way how this Serafel works. So it really is, it's quite an interesting compound when you look at its benefits in use as a disease management tool. So as Nadine mentioned, and this is actually her slide, it can be tank mixed or rotated with conventional chemistries. And another thing I'll just mention as well is when you look at the biofungicides, they are becoming increasingly important in wild blueberry production, because especially when you look at some of the export markets, as well as some others situated within North America, there is definitely a market for berries without the presence of any fungicide residue, whether it be an organic, and that's where it's good to know is the product organically certified, or what we also call then a pesticide-free berry. So definitely has a niche in both scenarios. So it's something that I'm glad we definitely undertook, and then it's also one that we have 4 or 5 other biofungicides that we're also just presently trying to figure out, okay, how can we make these new products work best in wild blueberry production to provide a residue-free berry. And there's some really interesting results. So they're going to be coming out from that in the next 3 to 4 years. So there's the label for Serafel. So product use is 0.5 kilograms per hectare, registered for botrytis in wild blueberry production. You can apply it on a 7 to 10 day interval. And for us, we're finding that when combined with a conventional fungicide, we also seem to get a little bit longer window of protection than if you use just a conventional fungicide alone. Okay, so to summarize then and look at the fungicides that are available for use in the crop year, and I know I probably missed some, so I'll apologize now, but I've tried to get down the major ones. What you'll notice is I have the monolinea, I've got botrytis, and then we have the leaf spot diseases, so Septoria and Spherulina, that's present there, and then the products that are associated with it. So to summarize, Proline and Sortel continue to be very good fungicides for monolinea control. Please check with your end user on use of the Sortel. Meredith Prime is also registered now for use in wild blueberries. You also need to check with your end user on it. And then we have also the presence of Maravon. When you combine it with Serafel, it really lifts its performance. And so if you used Maravon alone, I would rate its ability to control botrytis, and then followed by, we used to call Septoria, in the vicinity of 7 to 8. And then when you look at combination of the two, it lifts it up to overall a 9 to a 9.5. So definitely a lift. And I think it does give you a longer window of protection as well. And when you combine it to what we're seeing with with Pristine, it was a wonderful fungicide, a very unique one when it first came out, but unfortunately, it's pretty much run out of gas. There's a lot of selection pressures to it and resistance issues. So hopefully that gives you some insight on it as well. So with that, another thing I'll just mention is when you then look at what I'm referring to is this FRAC code. This is what I've been talking about with respect to the modes of action. So when you look at Proline and Sortel, they're both FRAC code 3. So they're in the triazole family of fungicides. And when you look then at what perhaps is the most broad number of fungicide, the group that's associated with it, it's the group 7s. And it's found in Luna, it's found in Miravis, the new active in it, epimetofen is a group 7. Marivon also has a group 7. So we've got a lot of group 7 fungicides that are out there. And for that reason, if I had a wish list, it would be to look at bringing in new modes of action. And there are some that are coming. And so hopefully in 5-10 years time, we'll be able to report on those and then show that we'll be able to have more of a mixture of different modes of action. That'll hopefully then allow us to keep using these conventional fungicides as effectively as possible. All right, and so some others that are in the pipeline, and I don't think they're registered yet for use in Canada. These include Miravis Dual, and then Sevia. So Sevia, I've been talking about it for quite a few years. I had a look this afternoon. It's not registered yet for use in blueberries in Canada, according to the BASF website. And then as far as the sprout ear fungicides, this is where we're hoping Sevia can really make some inroads. It is a really good triazole fungicide. It's one there's some aspects of it that are better than Proline, probably not as broad spectrum as what Proline is, but it is going to be an interesting fungicide for us. The Aprovia, what's been good about it over the past few years is there has been a transition to this lighter variant of the Aprovia. There's a few problems with this darker variant. Some of the phenotypes were a little bit susceptible to it. So I'm glad we worked through that, and we have this lighter formulation that's been used the past few years. It is a product, and especially when you combine it with Proline, it provides an excellent control of not only the Septoria spirulina, but also blueberry rust. So it's one that's continued to be quite effective. Chlorothalonil, the chlorothalonil products, whether it be Bravo or Echo, they can no longer be used in wild blueberry production. They've been deregistered. Okay, so it's something to also be aware of. Okay, and again, check with your end user, your processor on that. So hopefully this then gives you some insight then into the fungicide portfolio. I didn't have a chance to update the prices. Hopefully they came down, but I think at least they should hopefully be in the vicinity of what they were last year as well. Okay, and not many changes in the sprout year of production. The main thing that is happening as far as the biology is concerned is we're realizing there is this what we thought was Septoria for many, many years is actually, it wasn't Septoria, is spirulina. But there are indications there are other organisms that are present in these sprout fields, and I'm hoping that we've got a graduate student that'll be able to shed a little bit more light on that. So it's not one organism that's in that sprout ear that's causing the problems. It definitely appears to be a mixture. Okay, and so the cankers continue to be a problem. And when you look at the spirulina or the Septoria, you have the spores arriving on the lower surface of the leaf. Eventually, they typically go in through the stomata and find a back doorway into the leaf. There's some examples of the infection thread working its way into the interior of the leaf. And once it's in the leaf, it's bad news. The infection will really start to pick up. And eventually, and this is an example of Alternaria, but one that provides a really good illustration of what happens. Eventually, it'll start to cause the breakdown of particularly the mesophyll tissue, and you'll start to see these water-soaked lesions. They're really quite small. Eventually, you'll see areas of necrosis, typically starting on the lower surface of the leaf, eventually get larger. And then typically, as you get up to 1 to 5% of the leaf area, the ability of that leaf to make carbohydrates drops right off. And then eventually the plant has a stress response, will shed these leaves when the infection levels continue to escalate. And as a result of that, you get a lot of defoliation. And blueberry rust, I've talked about it for quite a few years, so there's not too many surprises associated with it. When you look at it, what's interesting is there is an alternate host, the hemlocks, and this is where the dangerous part, so the sexual stage of the rust disease process occurs. So what you have then is the movement and the infection then of the blueberry tissue, typically in early summer. And then this it's very polycyclic, can really take off. And when you look at rust pressures in a blueberry field, they really are quite explosive. And in addition to causing a reduction in the leaf area and eventual loss of leaf surfaces, there is some work that indicates that they're hemibiotropic organisms, so they can interfere with the formation of the floral buds, and as a result of this, keep the plant vegetative and be able to draw off its resources longer. And so this is another kind of a hidden problem that most likely exists with rust as well. So very, very prolific once it gets going in a blueberry field, and it's probably one of the quickest ways outside frost to lose a crop. It's really, really quite devastating when you look at what it can do. Okay, and it's quite easy to identify. You can see those rust-colored pustules. And then when you look at rust infection, the clean plot on your right, one that's pretty much defoliated, and this is an untreated control plot 60 days after the infection went in. So in this particular case, towards second, third week of August, it's done. And this just shows you the problems that can occur when you either have a poor product that's been used for rust control, or the plots themselves just didn't have any fungicide applied. So in this particular case, this was just right around Thanksgiving time, and just untreated areas, completely defoliated. So there's no resources there, or minimal resources there to help those developing floral buds. Products going into this year, Proline continues to be a very effective product. I should have put Sortel in there as well. It's the same active ingredient. Prothioconazole does a really nice job in controlling leaf diseases. And then, as I mentioned, the Aprovia, when it's combined with the Proline, also provides excellent. But also need to be aware of the ongoing discussions regarding tank mixes as well. So something to be check on as the growing season unfolds. So screening activities continue to be very important, something that we put a lot of effort in. And one of the things that as a researcher that you have to accept is, look, 90% of the time, you're either going to get no result or one that's not conducive to good things. And this is a good example of an active ingredient that gave us some phytotoxicity issues. So it is like trying to find a gem in the carpet, or diamond in the carpet, when you're looking at screening these new products. And so really we look at it from a 3-phase perspective. First phase is experimental products. You're looking at 6 to 10 years to really give these things a careful vetting. Once they've been released to us as researchers in a public institution to have a look at, then we have a look at the efficacy, for toxicity, and the registrants may use this data in the registration packages as well. And then the final stage is we got to figure out how to make best use of these in the wild blueberry production scheme of things. But the differences can be pretty considerable. And on the figure here to the right, if you compared Merivon to Pristine, this was a photograph. This one was actually up in Menton, but it was a side-by-side comparison, and it's just light and day different. And also, when the Merivon first came along, we realized that we're getting back to what we saw with Pristine, with good berry size, berry retention, canopy health characteristics as well associated with using that product. So putting these plots out as we're getting close to ramping up their use on a commercial basis will occur by strip plots. It's something we've tried to do as well. So that finishes up the disease management, and Patrick did a really excellent job on the research, so I really won't spend too much time on it. It's when you're looking at it, or won't spend too much time as far as providing additional background information. But just to provide or give you a little bit of additional insight, when you're looking at blueberry soils, a lot of them are podzols. So they're soils that they're really not good, or what I consider a high quality soil when you look comparing them to other agricultural cropping systems. So they're pretty low in fertility. Use of humates, it's something that we looked at back in the early 2000s, I think it was around 2003 up to about 2007. There was an AIF project through University of Prince Edward Island that was associated with this. And we saw some good results at the time, but we had other overriding problems, in particular the leaf diseases, that allowed us to not go any farther with exploring these on a commercial basis for use in blueberry production. So as we've developed techniques to clean up and keep the canopy healthy, all of a sudden, and especially as fertilizers are becoming more expensive, it kind of reignited my interest in having a look at these. And so, as Patrick mentioned earlier, there's a lot of benefits associated with using these and looking on the molecular side. Some of these are known to elicit the antioxidant enzymes, including superoxidized dismutase, catalyzed peroxidase. So they may help reduce stresses. And they're also known, as Patrick showed earlier, to increase root formation as a result of the improved root environment associated with using these products. So when I used the product, went over to the Agromart and picked up the product sample, and I was really, it is a very uniform product. It blends quite nicely with the blueberry fertilizers that were used in this particular study. Very, very uniform, easy to apply, it's really fascinating what we saw with respect to the results that were obtained. So when you look at it, it is an interesting tool to use, and especially as the price of the granular fertilizers continues to increase. And it is something that really we should have a look at with respect to, okay, well, how much is it going to improve the uptake and the efficiency of these fertilizers by the blueberry plant? Right. So as Patrick mentioned, there's various forms of humic substances. So we have fulvic acids, and then you have the larger, chunkier humic ones that he talked about before. And these are some similar photographs that if you actually looked underneath the scanning electron microscope, this is in fact what they look like. Okay. So in the soil environment, and this might be generalized a little bit too much, the nutrient availability is really improved with the use of these materials. And then as a result of that, nutrients such as phosphorus, they aren't locked up to the same extent as what you would see in an untreated fertilizer application. And as a result of this, it allows the blueberry plant to able to access more of these. So this gives you a bit of insight. And then as a result of this, as indicated by this figure, you do see some improvements in the plant growth characteristics. So I've had 2 years of trials of this in the group, in 2 years of trials of this in Nova Scotia. Started back in 2021. We harvested our first trials this past year. We'll have more coming off this year. We put them down by incorporating the research with the granular fertilizer that was being used. It's 4x4 meter plots. Wanted to make sure we had enough buffer there so that we knew we were focusing on plots that received the product. And the application went down towards the end of May, which it's a little bit late for 2 years ago. Ideal timing would be as those blueberries are just beginning the shoots are just emerging and really beginning to ramp up the growth. The leaf tissue collections were taken July 29th. And then we went in and collected yield component results, so floral bud numbers in November 6th. Of last year, just to get a bit of an idea. Okay, we think we're seeing some interesting features there with respect to the blueberry stems at the end of the sprout year. How's it going to measure up with respect to floral bud numbers? So the amount of product that we looked at 2 rates. So the 44 and then the 89 kilograms, so 1x and 2x rates. We incorporated it with 1628 fertilizer, application rate of 200 kilograms per hectare. Okay, and so those were the 5. So we looked at the use of the resurge alone, 2 different rates, and then the fertilizer alone, and then the fertilizer with a low rate, and then a high rate of the resurge. From a leaf tissue response, what we observed was, sure enough, the leaf tissue levels, and especially with phosphorus, went up considerably. where the resurge was used, and then even the uptake of nitrogen went up considerably with the application of the resurge. Okay? And the rate of this change, it really didn't change as much as we went from a 1x to a 2x application. But it was interesting that not only the phosphorus, but also the nitrogen uptake, and even the potassium uptake increased a little bit with using the resurge. Now, the other thing I better do just to qualify this statement is when you look at the trial site, and so this is what we call the old site at DeBert, it had a terrible fescue problem before this trial commenced, and so the field site itself, I would call it, given the fescue pressures were so heavy there the previous cycle, I would say that the available nutrients were probably really, really low, just because that fescue grass, it would have mopped up any residual nutrients that were present. The blueberry plants were also under considerable amounts of stress, also a really dry year. But going into crop this year, this just gives you a bit of an idea of the contrast. So we could still pick up differences in the plant health in the crop year. Okay, so over 360 days after application, probably closer to 400 days after application, you can see the visual differences in the plant health. And then we also picked up some differences in berry yield at this particular site. But again, these blueberry plants, they were pretty run down when the trial started, but we had cleaned up the fescue grass pressures going into this. So that was the results from the Research Center in DeBert, what we call the old site. This is where we have the trial located in Kemptown this year. And to give you a little bit of insight, product was applied just as the shoots were breaking the surface. And in this particular case, early July, you can still visually pick up where the product had been applied. So where you see the healthy green areas, there's a pretty good chance this is an area that received the resurge. Those that appear under stress, those are probably areas where it's absent. And the other interesting feature at this particular site, it wasn't under as much stress when we came back to it in September. Visually, the effects of the resurge weren't as apparent. It was pretty tough to pick out the treatment effects. So it was just in fields where they've been under a lot of previous stressors that you can really pick those up going into harvest. Now, interesting part then, when you look then at the effects on plant growth characteristics, so there were some minor effects on stem length. So stem length on tree control, stems are a little bit shorter, only 19 centimeters. With a resurge, they went up to between 23 and 25 centimeters. So you're up into that 8-inch tall stem, which is good. Floral bud numbers also went up a little bit from 3 into the vicinity of 4. So 20-25% increase in the floral bud numbers. But the telltale sign is, okay, well, what ends up as far as berries in the box? And in this case, we were able to get the yields up from 875 in an untreated control, where we just applied the regular fertilizer was around 1,000 grams per meter squared. We were up to get it into the vicinity of 1,247. Okay, so I'd say 20% lift as a result of using resurge combined with the regular granular fertilizer. But please remember, this was at a field site that was pretty run down with previous fescue pressures. So it definitely provided a good lift to the blueberries. So if you have a scenario where you're going into a sprout field this year, you've had some fescue issues that are now controlled. So you might have put some curb down. You got a nice clean field site to start with this year. This is a good, it might provide a good environment then to consider including the resurge with your regular fertilizer this going into this year. Otherwise, you may not see the same magnitude of effects. Okay, so to summarize, the product itself is great to use, as we mentioned before, in areas where the plant's pretty run down as a result of fescue issues. We still had visual differences in plant health and berry yield present in the cropping year at harvest. That was the situation at DeBert. And we've seen definitely some improvements in plant nutrition, the yield components, and then harvestable berry yield as a result of using that product. So with that, thank you very much. Hopefully I'm not too over time. And we'll take things from there. I'll just open up the chat.
That was great.
David, Chris Hinneberry.
Hey, Chris.
Hi, the previous presenter talked about research picking up aluminum, and perhaps it does pick up aluminum, but does it pick up enough to make a significant difference in a particular acreage? That's my question.
Oh my. Chris, I can't answer that. We didn't collect the data on it. We just didn't collect the data. I don't have anything to base it on other than what we saw visual cues. So I can't answer it. Yeah, I can't answer that. Yeah.
Okay, obviously in the field where you did the trial, the nutrients were picked up by the plants in a better way.
That's right.
So there probably was a factor there. I'm just wondering if it's a significant factor. I guess it's something you can study in the future.
Well, that's it. But so we do know the nutrients work their way into the plant, and in particular into the leaf tissue is the kind of the end result. We know that for sure. But can we say the aluminum levels were the aluminum situation was assisted? I don't think we can. We just don't have the data.
Okay,
but it is
thanks.
something. Yeah.
So another question in the chat box says, in the research rep's presentation, he shows some plant spread. Have you measured this at your trials?
Well, what's a good way to put it? I could see where you would have that in the long term. For a 2-year cycle, and especially in our trial, we didn't see it. But as I want to qualify that a bit, just that pearled field in the BERT was really, really run down as a result of fescue. So cleaned that out with curb, and it really gave the blueberry plants a nice lift. And it definitely helped fill in the coverage within the blueberry canopy. And that's, I think, I can say that with 100% certainty. As far as, spreading into the bare areas, I don't think I can be that optimistic. The data's just not there.
If I read your final slides, it's so right. You had the double rate, not necessarily giving much of an economical advantage. Is that, again,
That's right.
field conditions, or is that a case where there's maybe no advantage to going any higher than the lower rate?
And based on the 1-year results, Terry, there's no advantage. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's kind of some of the reasons why just stopping at that recommended rate is a good move on a go forward basis until get a better idea of how to better use the product.
Is there anyone else that would like to unmute themselves and quiz Dr. Percival on his presentation for this evening?
Okay. With that, I think we can wind down then, right?
Kind of looks that way. No, I want to thank you very much for your presentation. It was a pleasure having you on. It's been quite a while since we've been able to get you involved, so we much appreciate that. And we look forward to your future research and what comes back on some of these products you're working with.
Yeah, that's excellent. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to give me a shout.
And for all those in attendance, we certainly thank you for being part of our audience for the last 3 nights. We hope this has been a good information session for you and that you get your much needed pesticide points as well. We do hope to have some or all these presentations on the YouTube channel for review or future watching, if the presenters are agreeable to that. So we'll reach out to them and find out which presentations we can put on. And if you wish to review them at that point, then that'll be an option. And I think Chloe's going to put up the CCA.
Yep.
Any other housekeeping details I've missed, Chloe?
I don't think so. I think you got it. All right.
Thanks again, everyone, for being in attendance, and hopefully have a very successful season coming up.
Thank you, Terry.
Much appreciated.